Deep beneath the waves, there's a relic from the Cold War, and it's sending a chilling warning all the way to the surface. It's an incredible story of high-tech marvels, a terrible disaster, and a nuclear ghost that, well, it just refuses to rest. So let's dive right into the mystery of the K-278 Komsomolets.
Okay, I want you to picture a place where there is absolutely no light, where the pressure is so immense it could literally pulverize steel. That's where our story's happening, almost 1,700 meters below the surface. It's one of the most hostile places on our planet, and it's also the final resting place of a Soviet nuclear submarine.
And that ghost has a name, the K-278 Komsomolets. See, on April 7th, 1989, it went down after a catastrophic fire which tragically took the lives of 42 of its 69 crew members. But here's the thing. It didn't go down empty. It's still holding a nuclear reactor and 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes. And recent expeditions have confirmed our worst fears. It's actively leaking radiation. So that brings us to the big question. Are we looking at a ticking time bomb, a global catastrophe in the making? Or can the ocean actually handle a toxic legacy like this?
Now, to really get a handle on the threat today, you first have to understand the machine itself. Because before its tragic end, the K-278 wasn't just some submarine. It was a genuine marvel of engineering, a true triumph of its time. You see, this was a one-of-a-kind sub, part of Project 685, codenamed Plovnik. What made it so special was its revolutionary hull, made almost entirely of titanium. This made it unbelievably strong, but also unbelievably expensive. So expensive, in fact, that the sailors gave it a fitting nickname, the Golden Fish.
And that titanium hull, it gave the sub what was basically a superpower. On August 4th, 1985, the K-278 dove to a staggering 1,027 meters. That's over a kilometer straight down. It's a world record for a combat submarine that has never, ever been broken. At that depth, it was pretty much invincible. No torpedo from that era could even touch it.
But on April 7th, 1989, its invincibility just ran out. A fire erupted deep inside the 7th compartment. As the crew tried to make an emergency ascent, a high-pressure air line burst. This fed the flames, turning that compartment into a blast furnace with temperatures soaring over 1,100 degrees Celsius. For 5 agonizing hours, that crew fought to save their ship, but it was a losing battle. The K-278 sank, and the human cost was just devastating. For decades, the wreck just sat there in total darkness. But now, thanks to modern technology, we can finally peer into that abyss and see what's actually happening to this nuclear tomb on the seafloor. The real game-changer came in 2019. A remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, called the Aegir 6000, made the long journey down to the wreck. It sent back the first high-res images we'd seen in years, but more importantly, it took water samples right from the hull. And the results from those samples? They were absolutely shocking. One sample was taken from a ventilation pipe, where you could actually see these murky clouds coming out. The reading for radioactive cesium-137 was 800,000 times higher than the normal background level you'd find in the Norwegian Sea. Just wow. And it wasn't just cesium. Levels of another really dangerous isotope, strontium-90, which your body can mistake for calcium and store in your bones, were found to be 400,000 times higher than normal. These numbers were just staggering. It was undeniable proof that something down there is actively leaking. And by analyzing the specific isotopes of plutonium and uranium in the water, scientists could finally pinpoint the source. And here's the key. It wasn't the warheads. The nuclear fuel inside the reactor itself is actively corroding, reacting with the seawater and letting loose this cloud of radioactive material. Okay, so with numbers like that, you'd be forgiven for expecting a complete ecological dead zone around the wreck, right? But this is where the story takes a really surprising turn. Because despite that intense leak right at the source, a widespread catastrophe just hasn't happened. And the reasons why? Well, they're a series of fascinating paradoxes. First off, the deep ocean is just unimaginably vast. So while the radiation levels are astronomically high right at that ventilation pipe, just a few meters away, they drop off dramatically. The sheer volume of water in the Norwegian Sea is acting like a massive buffer, diluting the contaminants almost instantly. And that leads to the next paradox. Get this. Marine life is actually thriving on the wreck. Sponges, corals, and sea anemones have completely colonized the titanium hull. And yeah, they've absorbed some slightly elevated levels of cesium, but scientists haven't found any visible signs of mutations or damage.
So for now, the regional fishing industry remains safe. But what about the biggest threat of all, those two nuclear torpedoes? Well, back in the 90s, in a really rare moment of cooperation right after the Cold War, Russian crews in deep-sea submersibles managed to seal the damaged torpedo tubes with custom-made titanium plugs. And that 2019 survey confirmed it. This heroic bit of deep-sea engineering is still holding strong. The weapons-grade plutonium is still contained. And here's the final and maybe the most surprising paradox of all. Recent scientific models suggest that climate change might actually be helping. Yeah, you heard that right. As the ocean's surface gets warmer, the natural vertical mixing of water, a process called convection, actually slows down. And what that means is that the radioactive particles leaking from the wreck are more likely to stay trapped in the deep instead of getting churned up towards the surface and into the food chain. So the ocean is diluting the leak, the most dangerous stuff is sealed up, and the local sea life seems to be doing okay. But don't be mistaken. This is not a story with a happy ending, not by a long shot. That right there is the verdict from the scientists who have studied this wreck up close. And it's because, while that titanium hull is incredibly strong, it's not eternal. Salt water eventually dissolves everything, and sooner or later, corrosion is going to win. The structure will just keep getting weaker. Now, this is the obvious question, right? If there's a ticking nuclear bomb on the seafloor, why don't we just go get it? Well, the answer, unfortunately, is that trying to fix the problem could actually make it catastrophically worse. I mean, just think about it. Lifting an 8,500-ton wreck from nearly 2 kilometers down is an engineering nightmare. But this isn't an intact ship. Remember that fire? It reached over 1,100 degrees, which severely weakened the hull. The consensus among experts is that if you tried to lift it, the submarine would most likely break apart, instantly dumping its entire remaining radioactive inventory into the ocean. That's a risk nobody is willing to take. So for now, we just have to watch and monitor and rely on the sheer vastness of the deep ocean to absorb this mistake from a bygone era. The Komsomolet sits there, in the dark, a stark and very permanent reminder of the Cold War's toxic legacy. And all of this leaves us with one final, unsettling question. Nature is containing this nuclear ghost, for now, diluting its poison and locking it away in the abyss. But the forces of corrosion are relentless. The ocean is buying us time, but for how much longer?